So welcome to the worst band club, where everyone's a winner. The band was stunned. Poor Stickman wept. Sprock, too, was close to tears. To think this vile deception had been going on for years. There must be some escape, he cried, some spaceship we can use. The eldest one's in danger. There's no time for us to lose. Be cool, said Scat. So what? Who cares? It isn't our concern. Remember, you've been banished, Groob. No refund, no return. Sprock shook his head. You're kidding, right? There's got to be a way. The universe needs saving, Scat. You can't sit there all day. Hey, zip your lip, Scat snapped at Sprock. I'm head group on this rock. Then how about you show a little leadership, said Sprock. Scat's face betrayed a sudden rage. He raised his power axe. Sprock's fingers gripped his spling twanger, the volume set to max. But suddenly a snake-like shadow fell across the scene. Look out! A gulper! Someone cried. Sprock saw a flash of green. Scat hammered on his power axe, a massive pulse of sound. Sprock heard a splat, and bits of creeper rained down on the ground. Scat flicked the power axe to off and slung it by his side. The gulpers hear your every sound. There's nowhere you can hide. My power axe alone can keep the writhing horde at bay. That's why I'm boss, he glared at Sprock, then turned and strode away. When Scat had gone, a button pusher waddled from the crowd. Hi, he mumbled. Look, I wouldn't dare say this aloud. But, well, I have this theory, though of course I might be wrong. He handed Sprock a drawing. It's a ship that sails on song. A music-powered spacecraft? Brother frubled through her snouts. It's possible, I guess, she shrugged, and yet I have my doubts. Scat says that it will never fly, the little guy confided. Well, try it, Sprock declared, at once. The matter is decided. The task was huge, the concept vague, the physics somewhat moot. But once the seed of hope was sown, it gradually took root. They labored with the flame of freedom burning in their hearts, a hammer, 7 drill bits, and an endless sorts of parts. And slowly from the rubble grew a glorious creation, a flimsy pile of rusted junk, the means of their salvation. You'll never make it fly, said Scat, and even if you do, the gulpers will devour the lot and take you with it too. You're right, said Sprock. Without your help, we'll never get away. But if this works, we'll send a rescue ship without delay. Scat turned on Sprock in anger. Who asked you to interfere? We don't want you to save us. Can't you see we're happy here? You're happy here? When every note you play could be your last? When people live in fear of sound? Sprock looked at Scat aghast. I really thought you'd help us, Scat, for everybody's sake. I thought you were a leader, not a loser. My mistake. Scat stared at Sprock. His face went pale. The truth was all too stark. Then silently he turned away. Sprock's words had found their mark. They watched him go. This isn't good, said Stickman with a groan. At least you tried, said Brother. Looks like we are on our own. At last the ship was finished. Sprock called everyone around. All right, said Sprock, I'll count you in. Then you guys make some sound. They climbed aboard and set the sails to capture every note. A gallant bid for freedom in a tiny, homemade boat. Let's mesh, cried Sprock. The music flowed. The sails began to fill. But from the jungle swarmed the gulpers, closing for the kill. We need more power, Brother yelled. The EQ's going to blow. The treble's overloading, and the bass is way too low. Transposing to a higher key, Sprock shouted from the bow. Let's try F sharp, he cried, and cast the line from the prow. The spaceship slowly swung around and lifted from the ground. We're taking off. It really works. A ship that sails on sound. But even as he spoke, the gulpers reached out to the ship, enveloping the vessel in their vegetably vegetably rip. Poor button pusher tumbled from his perch atop the mast. The sonic sails flapped uselessly. The ship was sinking fast. Then came a sudden blast of sound. The gulpers writhed and squirmed. "It's Scat!" cried Sprock in wonderment. The sonic tide had turned. Scat hammered on his power axe. The gulpers split asunder, and Sprock and crew soared skyward on a rolling wave of thunder. Scat watched until the ship had gone, a tiny speck with wings. "Hey, Buttonhead, what say you make another of those things? But this time make it really big, with lights and lots of chrome. The universe needs saving. Groobs, it's time we headed home." Beneath a dark, forbidding sky that spoke of storms and rain, the blessing of the spling-twangers was underway again. A squad of prodmen, grim and silent, faced the restless crowd. The musical inquisitor stood arrogant and proud. For far too long the tuneful worlds have wallowed in decay, bereft of moral principles, with none to show the way. The eldest one is old and weak. It's time she stood aside. "From now on, I'm the ruler of the universe," he cried. The eldest one rose slowly and looked deep into his eyes, but all she saw was emptiness, depravity, and lies. She turned to face the audience. "Well, what say all of you? Is this the one to lead us? Is he virtuous and true?" The crowd glanced at the prodman and looked nervously away. It seemed that the Inquisitor was going to win the day. He stood before them unopposed, the President-elect. Then suddenly a voice rang out. "Your Honor, I object." The musical Inquisitor looked sharply down the aisle. Sprock stood there with his spling-twanger and answered with a smile. "Hello again. Remember me? You've met my friends before. It seems that we are just in time to settle an old score. I exercise my ancient right, in keeping with tradition. The ruler of the universe must face some competition." The musical Inquisitor rocked backwards on the stage. "You dare to challenge me?" he shrieked, in shock as much as rage. "You got it, snout man," Sprock replied, and switched to overdrive. "The worst band in the universe is coming to you live." He rattled off a stunning line that sent the prodmen reeling, a triple-octave mega riff with whammy bar and feeling. "Well put," remarked the eldest one. "This calls for a reply." She turned to the Inquisitor. "I trust you're going to try." But all at once his face had paled. He stood there hesitating. "Come on now," said the eldest one. "Don't keep your public waiting." A wave of panic crossed his face, a look of wild despair. He searched within for talent and discovered nothing there. Then, through the temple came a voice, a child as clear as day. "Look, Mommy," said the little voice, "the funny man can't play." The people saw the child was right. He couldn't play a chord. The musical Inquisitor was nothing but a fraud. He stood there in his impotence, their laughter in his ears, and deep inside a madness grew that drowned out all the jeers. "Go on and laugh," he snarled at them. "Go on and have your fun, for soon you'll know the sound of fear. This show has just begun." "You've made a fatal error, Sprock. You've got me all annoyed. If I can't rule the tuneful worlds, then they shall be destroyed." He pressed a secret button on his built-in microphone, and suddenly his spaceship took a life all of its own. It reared above their heads, a diabolical machine, the biggest hi-fi system that the world had ever seen. A lightning bolt lit up the sky. He held aloft a tape and thrust it in his spling-twanger. The crowd tried to escape. But instantly there came a noise that shocked them to the bone, a numbing flood of drivel. Random access digi-drone? The people staggered in the aisles, some fell upon the ground. So mindless was the music, so monotonous the sound. Sprock tried to play his spling-twanger, but soon was overcome. He slumped against the speaker stacks. his mind and fingers numb. Then suddenly a ship appeared, like some enormous bat. It skidded to a screeching halt, and from it bounded Scat. "Behold the lost musicians of the universe," he cried. "You've played your last, Inquisitor. There's nowhere you can hide." They stormed the giant speakers, but the drowning forced them back. Their instruments fell to the ground, their hearts and minds went black. "You fools!" cried the Inquisitor. "No one can stop me now. This is the final chorus, and the last note is kapow!" Then all at once a chord rang out, a clear and ringing tone that soared above the blandness of the awful digi-drone. All ears turned to the eldest one. Her spling-twanger had spoken. The darkness seemed to clear away. The evil spell was broken. "Arise," she cried. "The hour has come. Together we must fight. Let ancient song and innovation finally right." The crowd took up their instruments and rallied to the call. The lost musicians, Blippians, united, one and all. Sprock played his trusty spling-twanger, the throttle open wide, the worst bands in the universe all meshing by his side. The sound that they created pierced the droning like a knife, the eager blade of constant change, the cutting edge of life. The musical Inquisitor began to gag and choke, as overhead the giant hi-fi billowed clouds of smoke. His spling-twanger exploded. Tangled tape flew everywhere. A frightful squeal of rending steel, then silence filled the air. The temple lay in ruins. Sprock was nowhere to be seen, but then a muffled groan was heard from where the stage had been. Sprock staggered from the wreckage, and the waiting crowd went wild. The eldest one embraced him. "Welcome home, my son," she smiled. The musical Inquisitor sat sobbing on the ground, the remnants of his spaceship lying scattered all around. His dreams of domination fled like shadows in the sun. The rain had stopped. The clouds rolled back. A new day had begun. "Rejoice!" exclaimed the eldest one. "Rejoice in our salvation.